Buenos días a todos y a todas, bienvenidos a la cuarta conferencia de Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno. Desde luego es una auténtica satisfacción tener el salón de acto tan lleno de personas jóvenes, y también hoy es un placer tener aquí a nuestro conferenciante, que es una figura de la neurociencia, el doctor Giacomo Rizzolatti. En primer lugar, tiene la palabra don Teodoro Sánchez Ávila, presidente del patronato de la Fundación Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno.
Es un motivo de gran alegría celebrar un año más la conferencia Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno. Parece mentira que ya sea la cuarta edición. Como saben, Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno fue una gran mujer que supo conservar su patrimonio para legarlo a las nuevas generaciones, mediante la creación de una fundación al servicio de la sociedad. Gracias al amor por la ciencia que le contagió su marido, Julio Peláez, quiso que uno de nuestros fines fundacionales fuera el apoyo a la investigación científica. El patronato que me honro en presidir, tras varios meses de reuniones y seminarios y ayudado por el asesoramiento y numerosos expertos, tomó en el 2013 la decisión de concretar este deseo en un plan de apoyo a la neurociencia española. En esta elección se tuvo en cuenta, en primer lugar, el carácter interdisciplinar de la neurociencia, que la ha convertido en la rama de la ciencia con más desarrollo en las últimas décadas y que se plantea muchos de los retos más importantes de nuestra sociedad. Además, se tuvo en consideración que apoyar la investigación en neurociencia se inscribe dentro de la mejor tradición científica española. El trabajo de don Santiago Ramón y Cajal es el pilar de la moderna neurociencia. Pero, sin duda, el aspecto que más influyó en la decisión del patronato de la Fundación es que la neurociencia afecta directamente a la persona, porque contribuye a mejorar la vida de las personas, así como a curar o aliviar a quienes padecen enfermedades neurológicas y mentales. Este plan fue presentado en la Real Academia Nacional de Medicina de la mano del Comité Científico instituido para promoverlo. Los objetivos de este plan se llevan a cabo mediante diversas acciones. En primer lugar, la convocatoria anual de contratos predoctorales para jóvenes que realizan sus tesis en el área de la neurociencia. Actualmente la disfrutan 17 jóvenes en toda España. En segundo lugar, la convocatoria bianual de ayudas a proyectos de investigación en este ámbito. Actualmente se financian 15 proyectos en el laboratorio de toda España. Y, por último, la Cátedra de Neurociencia que mantenemos con esta Facultad de Medicina, dirigida por la catedrática Carmen Cavada, a quien agradezco sinceramente todo su ilusión, esfuerzo y buen hacer. Sin ella, nada de esto sería posible. Entre muchas exitosas actividades de esta cátedra, nació esta conferencia anual Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno, que hoy celebramos. Por ello, ya han pasado algunos de los nombres más prestigiosos del presente y del futuro de la neurociencia internacional. Hoy agradecemos al profesor Giacomo Rizzolatti que nos honre con su asistencia y con su magisterio. Y también agradezco a nuestros queridos rector y decano que nos acojan en esta gran universidad con la que estamos encantados de poder colaborar en beneficio de la ciencia. Por último, les doy las gracias a todos ustedes que nos acompañan hoy asistiendo a esta cuarta conferencia Tatiana Pérez de Guzmán el Bueno. Muchas gracias.
I thank you all for your presence at the fourth conference, Tatiana, as I referred for short to the foundation that supports the chair I head. I wish to thank in particular our rector for chairing the conference and coming to the school despite his many responsibilities. I also thank most cordially our dean and the president of the Tatiana Foundation Council for their trust and constant support of the activities I carry out in the chair. We are highly honored today for sharing the time with Professor Giacomo Rizzolatti from the University of Parma in Italy. My task now is to introduce you to Professor Rizzolatti. Born in Kiev, then Soviet Union, and now Ukraine, where his Italian ancestors had emigrated, he moved to Italy with his family when he was just 6 months old. He studied medicine at the University of Padua and specialized in neurology. He spent then 3 crucial years at the Institute of Physiology of the University of Pisa, led by the eminent neurophysiologist Giuseppe Moruzzi. There he was captivated by research in the brain. This experience changed the course of his professional life as he decided to devote himself to understand how the brain works. Thus, he moved to the University of Parma with one of Moruzzi's collaborators. He has spent most of his career in Parma, though he made stays in Canadian and US universities and maintains collaborative work with research centers in California. Professor Rizzolатti's work focused on understanding the primate motor system by recording neurons in non-human primates. He was interested especially in the relationships between the motor system and cognition, including attention. But he's now worldwide famous because in 1996 he observed and reported the so-called mirror neurons, initially in the monkey motor cortex. These neurons were active not only when the monkey made a motor action, but also when he observed the same action performed by another primate. He immediately realized the potential importance of this class of neurons for social interactions, including the ability to understand the actions of others. More recently, he has shown that mirror neurons represent a general principle in the brain, including our own human brain. Indeed, mirror mechanisms are at work in different brain systems, sustaining functions like empathy and imitation. We shall hear all this from him in a moment. Professor Rizzolatti has been distinguished with numerous honors and awards. I'll mention just a few. He's a member of the Accademia Europea, of the Accademia del Lincei, honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and member associé étranger of the Académie des Sciences Institut de France. He has received honorary degrees from universities in France, Russia, Belgium, and the US. He also holds an impressive list of prizes, among which I wish to highlight the Premio Príncipe de Asturias de Investigación Científica y Técnica in 2011, and the Brain Prize awarded by the Lundbeck Foundation in 2014. After this curriculum, I am sure that we agree we are very privileged to have Professor Giacomo Rizzolatti with us today. I would like to end by thanking him heartily for coming to our medical school to share with us, especially with the students, his life experience on research on the brain and his insight on the brain mirror mechanisms. Thank you so much.
I thank very much Magnifico Rettore for inviting me and the other authorities, and I thank also Carmen Cavada for her very nice and warm presentation. So my talk will be about the mirror mechanism. About 20 years ago, we discovered a very strange set of neurons in the motor cortex. These neurons were firing both when the monkey performed an action and when the monkey was observed a similar action. So the representation, sensory representation, was transformed into a motor representation. That was the beginning. That subsequently we found that this mechanism is very important in general for understanding not only action of others, but also the emotion of others. So my talk will be about that, and I will start from the very beginning, just to show you how we proceeded from 20 years ago to now at what we are doing now. So the early data, even before early data, I think you know that neurons talk one to another by generating action potential. What you see here are action potential recorded from a nerve. Similar action potential you can record from the visual cortex, from the motor cortex. It's a general language of the brain. And the code its modulation of the frequency. Well, one technique which is very much used in physiology is to put an electrode inside the brain of an individual and record this action potential. That's what we did for many years. So we recorded action potential and tried to understand what this neuron is saying to other neurons. For example, a trivial thing. In visual cortex, of course, they are responding to visual stimuli, but yet some respond to color, some respond to orientation. So the scientist should be a kind of Sherlock Holmes and to understand what this neuron is doing. So we used this procedure to the motor cortex. And we did something different from classical way in which the motor cortex is studied. We used an ethological approach. So instead of measuring velocity, acceleration, trajectory, and so on, typical elements of motor system, we examined what happens when we give to the monkey, for example, a piece of food, or when the monkey is bringing a piece of food to the mouth, or breaking something, and so on. So it was a kind of playing with the monkey, instead of observing only the motor, pure motor activity. And here started some surprises. The first is here. So if you look at this slide, you see that there is an activity. These SMOT are those action potential I mentioned before. So when the monkey is grasping with the right hand, in B, there is a discharge. The same in C, when he's using the other hand, but also in A, when the monkey is grasping with the mouth. So you see at this point, a dogma of motor system disappeared. It's not the movement which is encoded, but what we call it the motor act. So the movement organized in such a way to reach a goal. Be careful, the goal seems to be a philosophical concept, but will be very important subsequently to understand the mirror mechanism. So in the motor cortex, there are a set of neurons which encode the goal of the motor. This neuron said grasping. It doesn't say move the right hand, move the left hand. That means grasping. So, of course, one has to prove it more strongly. So we did this experiment. You see here is the monkey using normal pliers. In order to grasp it, you have to close the hand, but also these crazy reverse pliers in which one has to open the hand in order to grasp. So the goal is the same, but the act is completely different. And now I will show you monkey, which learned to do that. And what you do, it's very simple. You have to correlate action potential. Action potential you will hear will be tac, 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 tac. That's the action potential amplified and put in the loudspeaker. And what the monkey is performing. Grasping neuron. You see, it's grasping now with the instrument, but look here, nothing happens. Here, yes. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Why? Because when there is no goal, but simple movement, there is no discharge. When the monkey is grasping, there is a discharge. In spite of the fact that the monkey is opening the hand. Instead, it's a typical grasping neuron, so close the hand. Okay, that was very important to demonstrate that we have a system encoding the goal of action. The other surprise was that in the motor cortex, you have many neurons which respond to visual stimuli. The first type we described, imagine the monkey is grasping something small like that. That's called precision grip, erasing, for example. So you show to the monkey erasing, and there is a discharge. The monkey is doing nothing. It's completely still. And still there is discharge. Or you have a neuron which fires when the monkey grasps like that. You show an apple, and there is a discharge. We studied this together with a Japanese group who they found something similar in the parietal lobe. And so we described the circuit which transforms object into action. You see an object, you have an automatic transformation into action. These neurons are called canonical neuron. Canonical neuron. The surprise, however, that was accepted by the community, this was very interesting, but somehow was not a revolutionary thing. The thing has to be such a way. what it was a real surprise for us and for everybody was that there were some neurons like this one. In B, it's again the monkey grasping something. In A, it's a person grasping. So what's interesting in this case is not the object. We already described it, there is canonical neurons which respond when the object is interesting. But in this case, what is interesting for the monkey is the action of the other person. Not only, but there is a congruence. It's grasping the monkey, grasping the person, or breaking the monkey, breaking the person. So there is a congruence between the two actions. The action which was perceived by the monkey was transformed into a motor action. These neurons, we call it mirror neurons, and they are known now as mirror neurons. Now I will show another video. You have to do the same thing that you did before. You have to correlate the noise, tack, 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 the action, with what either the monkey does or the person is doing. Again, a grasping neuron.
Come prima, feeling. Ancora.
Grasping effect. Same neuron.
Fai ancora.
It's like a dialogue.
Prova questo,
It's always grasping.
Prova con uno dei tuoi stimoli che lei conosce.
Well, the quality is very poor, but that's not something that we did for television or for show. It was just our protocol. That's our experiment. So it's a bit long, but you understood, I think, that first it's very constant, the responses, and it doesn't matter who is grasping, either the person or the monkey. It's the same. So the same information is transformed from an action, from an observed action, in a real action. It's important to stress that that's something that not have been taught to the monkey. It's not conditioning. Here is an experiment in which we brought a monkey which has nothing to do with the experiment. The monkey A is sitting in its cage and is eating. It's an intruder, has nothing to do with the experiment. The other monkey, however, looks at the intruder, and every time the intruder puts something in the mouth, there is a discharge in the monkey from which we recorded. So it indicates it's a natural condition, this system works. These are experiments done about 15 years ago or something like that. Recently, with Luca Bonini, we introduced a new type of electrodes that you see here, which is important because at the end of my talk, I will tell you something about human study with these electrodes. These electrodes have a big advantage that you record not only from the tip, but you record from the shaft. You see all these small holes. So you record simultaneously from an entire column or from many, many neurons simultaneously. So doing that, we can quantify how many neurons of different type are present in premotor cortex in area 5. And you see that the majority are purely motor, but there is quite a substantial number of mirror neurons and of canonical neurons. That's the basic principle of mirror neurons, but what can be the function of this one? So here I like to quote Marc Généraux. Marc Généraux was my colleague. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, and he was really a pioneer of the idea that motor system has cognitive function. And he wrote, a mere visual perception without involvement of the motor system would only provide a description of the visible aspects of the movements of the agent, but it would not give precise information about the intrinsic components of the observed action, which are critical for understanding the action, what action is about, its goal and how to reproduce it. Here there are different elements. One is imitation, but I am not going to talk about that today. But in order to understand better this stuff, I make a jump. This system exists also in humans, and there is a beautiful experiment in London about dancers. So if you show in a fMRI, I will explain later better, but imagine a person looking at a dancer, and he is a professional dancer, his activity in the mirror system is extremely strong. If you put in the same condition a person who is not a professional dancer, the activation is very small. But even more, if you put a dancer of capoeira, you know, this Brazilian war dance, for him, classical dancer is nothing. But if he see the dancing of capoeira, there's a big discharge of the mirror neuron. So when you have a competence, you understand much better what you are doing. I think all of you have seen playing tennis, Nadal or Federer, and you play tennis, you understand why they are really great players. For who never played tennis, say, oh, well, they are running with the rackets. So you must know. That's very important because the knowledge of sport, the knowledge of music is very important then to understand music, sport, and so on. But let's go back to the monkey. I will come to human later. After this data, we decided we have to trace the circuit. And we asked at this point the help of people in Louvain, in Leuven. Why? Because to do a circuit, you cannot use single neurons. You have to use brain imaging. But brain imaging, especially that related to fMRI, to magnetic field, it's very difficult in the monkey, because if the monkey moves, you have changes in the magnetic field and you have no data, you have only artifact. What they did in Leuven, they have a very clever idea. They trained the monkey to fixate a point. The monkey was sitting in sphinx position and was looking at a point. When the point changed color, the monkey has to move the hand in order to be reinforced. And they did that for 1 month in a pseudo scanner. It was not a real scanner, it was just a game. But after 1 month, the monkey was liking very much sitting there because she was reinforced. After that, they placed the monkey in the real scanner in the evening when the patients are not using it, and in a cheap way, they can get an fMRI in the monkey. So we worked with them, and if you look at the last row in these slides, it's 3 Tesla, it's a strong magnetic field, and there is activation in 3 areas. I have not a pointer, but you can see there are 3 major red points. One in the area which is a visual, STS, one in parietal, and the other in frontal. I will show you better in these slides, which is a more complex thing, but you indicate the circuit of mirror neurons. It starts from an area which called superior temporal sulcus. I mean, superior temporal sulcus, there are many areas, but some of them send to the parietal lobe, which is the second station, and then it goes to the motor cortex. With David Pérez, who is the guy who first described the property of STS, we worked together. We never found a neuron with motor property in STS. So the mirror system starts in the parietal lobe, and then it became even stronger in the frontal lobe. So in the temporal lobe, there is no mirror neurons, but they are complex neurons which respond. It fits very well because, for example, you probably see this lower bank 2. The lowest, David Pérez recorded from their grasping neuron. That's exactly what is going on. So we demonstrated the circuit. By the way, that was a rather complex experiment because we also put tracer in order to be sure which are the STS area which are involved. However, that's a technical problem. Well, now we know that there is mirror neuron in the monkey. Of course, what was the next question? Are similar mechanism in humans? And so we went the first time to Milano. That was 96, 97, so many years ago. There was no fMRI at the time in Milano, but there was a PET center. And the PET center is based on isotopes. Anyway, we injected isotopes and we look at what happens in humans if you in front of him doing some gesture. Here it's interesting that when I discovered, or we discovered mirror neurons in the monkey, my feeling was more, I was scared rather than happy, because it was something strange. I was afraid that may I describe something wrong, which for physiologists, like for an engineer, make a bridge which fell down, so you cannot describe something wrong. In this case, we were very happy, because although it was very, very elementary stuff. The cyclotron was in a near room, the technician was running with his isotopes and so on. But anyway, to see that progressively, when you do action, you see activation of parietal and motor cortex was really a big satisfaction. So later on, this experiment is repeated much better by many people. And what you see here is a meta-analysis which we draw from the data of Carl Zilles, Kaspers, and the other from Jülich. He's one of the best, maybe the best European center for anatomy. And you see in humans, the activation is exactly as in the monkey. You see the visual area, then you have the parietal lobe and the frontal lobe. It's very similar. So in evolution, not the basic circuit remained the same, so there was no big changes. Of course, the area is much larger and so on. So the next step was to demonstrate it is true that it's the goal which is encoded and not simply other things, movements and so on. So we presented to humans. Now, it's a student in the scanner, and he sees a movie. The movie is in A human hand grasping an object, in B, a robot hand grasping an object, and if you see A and B, it's very similar. Why very similar? Because it's grasping. It doesn't matter who is grasping. But there is a small difference. If you make the subtraction in C, you see there is a part of inferior parietal lobe only on the left side, which is active. So there is something specific. We continue this experiment using other instruments, and you see typically it's always the left parietal. Why? Well, practically in the same years, Johnson Frey showed that if you use tool, do the action with the tool, you have activation of this part. And for neurologists, it's not a surprise, because one of the symptoms of ideomotor apraxia is the incapacity to use tool. So what is the conclusion? First, we understand the action by a specific circuit. And with Guy Urban, we did also in the monkey. Monkey also have this basic circuit, but have nothing in the parietal lobe. That's typically human. But human understand something more, understand the capacity, how you did with the tool, and that's specific for the parietal lobe. So you see, now we move, that there are some things you understand basically, and something which is related to your specific capacity. You are able to use tool, you understand. I mentioned it before, Federer or Nadal, it's the same thing. If you use well tool, you understand who is using well tools. Well, now there was a kind of crisis, because the people said, well, now you said that these neurons are so important for understanding action, but there are some actions that probably you cannot understand with this system. I think it was a very reasonable objection. And we did another experiment with Buccino. This experiment is very simple, but I think the consequences are really important. So in the first part of the experiment, the student, liar in the scanner, saw this boy biting a piece of food, or the monkey biting the piece of food, or the dog doing the same. So something which is common to all three species are able to bite, common motor repertoire. Second part of the experiment, the guy was reading a newspaper, and you saw only the lip reading, so you don't hear the sound, the lip reading. The monkey was making lip smacking. Lip smacking for ethologists is considered an affiliative gesture. So the monkey used it when, well, doesn't know, is my friend, not my friend, I am good, something of this kind. And the dog was barking, no noise. So the result was very clear. That's the first part. Look at the left hemisphere on this side, on my side. These red dots, red spots, are practically identical. So when you see a man or a dog biting, you have the same activation. Dog is like you. There is no difference. But here, the difference is dramatic. When you see somebody reading, you have an activation of a specific type of center. For example, here is very clear Broca's area, great activation. The interesting, however, is dog. When dog is barking, you have an activation of the visual system, but you don't have anything in your motor system. Well, why? That's very important because it indicates that we can understand the action of others in two radically different ways. One, it's phenomenological. You understand because what he's doing enters inside your visual motor system and it's like you. The other, you have to think. So you understand the dog is barking, not because you have a system, but because you learned it. Exactly as you understand why an apple falls down, or a physical law, or why the birds are flying. So one way is phenomenological. The other way, it's a kind of, you have to reasoning. It's the capacity to inferential thinking, in order to use philosophical. You will see this difference, it became dramatically important for emotion. But we can understand the action of others into radically different way. Here is a sentence from a phenomenologist, from Merleau-Ponty. The sense of gesture is not given but understood. It is recaptured by an act of the spectator. The important part is the other one. It is as if the other person's intention inhabited my body, my his. In other words, if you go inside a bar and you see somebody grasping a glass of beer, you don't think, oh, there is a hand, there is a beer, there is a glass, put all together, made a lot of reasoning, and decide, oh, this guy is drinking beer. But you have an immediate comprehension because your motor system is active in this way, exactly the same as if you were drinking the piece of beer, which makes, I think, a lot of sense. You never make this complicated reasoning when you see something simple. I need some water. No, it's here, it's here. Thank you. So the next step was to move to something else. Some of our actions are cold action, I mentioned before, grasping some beer and so on, but some actions are emotional action. So, but before doing that, with two students, Caruana and Gelsini, we explored the insula, which is an important center for emotion, in the monkey. So we are back to the monkey. And in this case, what we did, we made a study, a very careful study of insula, stimulating the insula in its different parts, because we were convinced that the insula is not a homogeneous structure, but it's a structure with many different functions. I am not going to explain you all the story that we discovered, but I will show you two parts of the insula which are extremely interesting for what I am saying. And what happens? Look at B. In B there are two regions, rostrally, anteriorly, one red, one blue. Well, now you will see what happens when I stimulate electrically the red region with a prolonged stimulation. It's not single shock, it's prolonged stimulation. Now there are no spikes, but you have to correlate the red light, which indicates stimulation, with the behavior of the monkey. Red light. Red light. Red light. So I think it's obvious. It produces ingestive behavior. So the monkey is moving the mouth, it's licking, and so on. Every time. Now, I move my electrode, and from the red zone, I go to the blue zone and do exactly the same thing. Red light. Red light. Now that's a food that she likes. No, disgust. Another piece of food which she likes, nuts. No. Now she is surprised. It's something so nice, and yet, no, it's... Now she's eating, no light. You see, it's almost a surprise in her face, seeing that something so good became disgusting. So what it means, that we have in the insula one dorsal region, which means positive ingestion, eats, is good, and a ventral part, which is not. Now, disgust, it's not, seems something not important, but if you if you look at Darwin, he thinks that this is one of the basic emotions, the most important for survival, because if you know that somebody there shows disgust, you don't go there to eat. If somebody is vomiting, you never will go there. So disgust is a very important emotion, one of the basic emotions. Now, what in humans? So with Vittorio Gallese and Christian Kaiser, we did an experiment in humans, fMRI, and we went to Marseille. That's an old experiment, but we understood it better now. So we went to Marseille because there was a group of people which was very, very good in putting odorants in the nose. You know, for a physiologist to be sure of how much odorants you put, it's volatile and so on. Anyway, in Marseille they are very, very good. We went there and we made again an experiment which is divided into parts. In the first parts, they put in the nose these different odorants, and I am interested in one, in the disgusted one. You can imagine what it is, rotten eggs. Everybody is disgusted. I have not found one person who said that rotten eggs, it's a nice odor. So rotten eggs, and we look at what happens in the brain. Second part of the experiment, we put social stimuli. In this case, there was no natural stimulus, but was the actor of Marseille Theatre presenting different faces with different emotions. So here, the different faces. Again, you have to think about disgust. So that's the first part of the experiment. If you see B, which is a horizontal section, you have activation of the rostral part of the insula, exactly the same part that I showed you before in the monkey, determine the sense of disgust. By the way, there is also neurosurgical data to indicate that if you stimulate, you can even reach to vomit from there. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You see that there is this red activation. That was not new because other people also showed it before us. The big data were this one. Now look at the white. The white are the voxels which are activated both by natural stimuli and by observing a person who is disgusted. So the same voxel, so the same neural population which is active when I feel something disgusted in my nose are also active when I see somebody which is disgusted. So what it means? It means that I don't understand that you are disgusted, but I feel disgusted like you. I share your experience. We are in the same state. So we have a system which allows us not to understand what the other are doing, but to be in the same state. You and I are feeling in the same way in this moment. Similar experiment has been done then also for pain, and now I will show you then later, for other emotion. So we have a system, look, it's extremely important, which allows us to understand the other in a way which is experiential. It's not reasoning. Of course we understand also reasoning. Also we have a system which prevents a surgeon when he operates, he sees blood, but he's not emotionally involved. He has to do it. And the police, the special forces, they beat the people, they see people with blood, but they continue their job. So we have a system that blocks it. But the horrible things, if the system, it doesn't work, if pathologically or for ideological reason or for other reason, it's not working. Because in this way, you don't feel that the other is like you, but you think that the other is another. It's another species, it's something different. I don't want to go in political details, but if there is ideology, like Nazi in the 30s, which somehow convinced the people that a part of population was not real human, but Untermenschen, so it was something not real human, well, you can expect everything. If you read the process of Eichmann, when he was in the tribunal, Eichmann said, I did never something wrong, because I simply obeyed to order. And said, but that's what a human being. But we're not real human beings, they're Untermenschen. And the interesting thing, the Eichmann was examined by 3 psychiatrists, and he was not a monster at all. All his reaction absolutely normal. He liked his children, he liked his country, was absolutely normal person who obeyed the order. But the order was, if somebody will tell you, cut the tree, you probably will obey if you are in this job. So for him was transportation of Jews from Budapest to Auschwitz was the same as transportation of cattle from one city to another. So because so it's a very dangerous mechanism, which I think then here it's something which is from the Bible, which I think was clear even in the ancient time. So because sometimes people say, well, how we can fight against this idea that I am the only person who counts. Well, I think that's something go in the history. So you have to consider the other like yourself, because you have this basic mechanism. But sometimes egoism, ideology, etc., can destroy it. Now I go to last part of my talk, which will be rather short. And one at the beginning of this century, the people discovered brain imaging. We were all enthusiastic. I remember reading a paper by Roland Larsen and the other people from Denmark in which they described that a person just lying in the bed and thinking about movement have an activation of certain part of the brain. Marvelous, something incredible. So you can study without movement what happens in the brain. And for many years we were all very enthusiastic about that. But then one found there were some flaws in this system. First, the data was correlational. It was not causal. It was just a correlation. When he does something, it's there. Second, the brain imaging compels you to stay absolutely still. So it's not ethological. You cannot do movement, you are very limited. And the third, the most important, time. All our data of brain imaging are static picture. It's not films, but our life is not static. It's continuum movement, etc. So there are this weak point which somehow renders some of the data not so strong as we believed it 10 years ago. So recently, with a group in Milano, we used what is called stereo EEG. So we recorded in humans. This is technique which has been developed originally in France by Banco et Talairac in order to localize the focus of epileptic seizures. Epilepsy is a disease which is cured in most of the cases, in 75% of cases by drugs. But unfortunately, there is a group of patients which do not respond to drugs. So their focus must be put away. And this technique, developed in France and then in Italy by Munari and by others, is to insert, by the way, here is the people. Giorgio Lorusso is the neurosurgeon who really is very favorable to research, and Ivana Sartori is a neurologist, and we work very well with them. Well, here is a few technical notes. You do first a structural MRI in order to be sure how the brain is organized, and then you insert these red dots are electrodes that you insert inside the brain of the patient in order to localize the focus. And the electrodes are similar, you don't see very well, but it's there, similar to those I showed you before, in which you record also from the shaft. So typically they put from 10 to 16 electrodes. Each of them have 10 points from which you can record. So you have a picture of the brain of a patient from 160 points. And you record EEG. What we use, it's only the high frequency gamma. We don't want to make a discussion about what alpha means. So we discuss high frequency gamma because that corresponds to action potential, essentially. There are nice studies in monkey which show the correlation. So now imagine the patient. It's, by the way, they do also arteriography, angiography. The blue, it's the artery, and it's very impressive. I think how good our surgeons insert all these electrodes without touching the vessels. So really, there is high master to do something like that. Anyway, that's it. Now imagine a situation. So we have a patient. The patient have epilepsy, and they put this electrode inside. And for 3-4 days, they record day and night EEG, and they record day and night the video in order to be sure if there is a crisis, there is a seizure or something of this kind. So we have a complete description of behavior and we have a complete description of EEG. In addition, the patients are bored because they don't know what to do. They read the newspaper in the morning and they don't know what to do. They watch television, they don't know what to do. So they are very happy if you go there and say, we can do an experiment which will be useful for you and for other people. So they are very collaborative. Now, we can do several types of experiments with them. I will show you something. The first, I already mentioned, time. So this is not really our experiment, it's a surgical experiment. In order to be sure how it's organized, the brain, they stimulate the median nerve, the tibial nerve, the median nerve, and the trigeminal nerve to have. Now, if you stimulate the median nerve, you have this picture. But this is a global picture, like you can obtain with fMRI. But look what happens if you start to look at time. So at the beginning, you have an activation. I am sorry for this flat map, but that's not my fault. The fault of nature, which put gray matter inside the sulci. So in order to see what is inside, you have to open this flat map, so indicate also what is in the gray matter inside the sulci. Anyway, if you look at this, you see this yellow, which corresponds to what you learned in physiology, that somatosensory stimuli are localized in S1, is area 3A, 3B. But after, let's say, 40 milliseconds, it moves rostrally. After 60, practically, it's very little in the somatosensory cortex. The motor cortex is very interesting. But the dramatic thing that after 120 milliseconds, it's pericilian region, which is active. And the wave there, the discharge, the gamma discharge, it's for 200, 300 milliseconds. So it's completely different picture. So you know that perception is probably in this first 10 milliseconds, but then there is all this prolonged discharge. And one possibility, this prolonged discharge, is to give you awareness of your arm, of your limb, and so on. So, because that's a single shock, but in real life we have continually. So you see how the picture changed. Here is an experiment that has been done by us. Look only on the lowest row. The onset is the presentation of an object. Then either a hand of this instrument enter into the field, then it moves, and finally it grasps. Now, here, what will be if we have no time? Here are all the leads, all the points on the electrodes, which are active during this action. You see some of them are in the posterior part of the brain, some are in the anterior, but you have no idea how they organize. They are all there together. Now time, if I put the time, the black are the presentation of the object. They are all posterior, is the visual area. The red is the action. And you see it's the action going progressively in front, including the mirror area of the frontal lobe, of the parietal lobe. And our surprise was, I don't know if you can see, but in S2, I don't have a pointer, there is blue point, which indicates in S2-1 you touch something. So when you see an action of a person, you don't only have the feeling of what he's doing, but even your somatosensory area became active. So it's really a film. In your head, it's a replication of the film of the action. It's not simply something static, like a picture. The final point is that in this patient, you can also stimulate the brain. As a matter of fact, even the surgeon stimulates sometimes in order to see the reaction. And here it's something that we are going to publish. We just finished the experiment. What you see in this nice color is what is called a single-edge gyrus. Again, single-edge gyrus is not homogeneous. By the way, this anatomical parcellation has been done by Vogt and by Palomero Gallagher. So it's a very nice modern parcellization of the cingulate. But I am interested in what happens when you stimulate. So when you stimulate these different parts, you have different behavior. The first part I want to show you is this blue one, the dark blue and the pale blue. So look at the left part. When you stimulate there is different behavior. Ventrally, the patient say, I have an urge to move, I want to go away, I don't know what, but I want to go away. That's what we call it escaping. Then the other is manipulatory, they don't know why, but they start doing something like that. And the final is body directed, they touch them. So practically in this area, in this blue area, going from dorsal to ventral, this organization of something which is alert. And that's fitting with some data. And here you see the difference between this system and fMRI. People with fMRI said, here it's pain, because it's true. If you apply a pain stimulus, there is activation of this area. But if you stimulate this area, there is no pain. There is no pain. Why? Because pain elicits, in addition to pain, also the desire to go away or to remove. And there is a very nice paper, fMRI, by Yanetti in London, who used pain, very strong auditory stimuli, very strong visual stimuli, and this area became always active. But became active not because it perceives pain, it perceives sound, it perceives light, but because it's an ancient area which gives you, be careful, you must do something. And it's interesting because psychologists made tremendous error with this area. If you look psychological literature, even very great, very good psychologists said this area is very important for Stroop effect. Stroop effect is a complex psychological thing in which you have to decide what to do. But it's nothing to do with Stroop effect, simply that when you have this condition, you are in the alert condition. You think what I have to do. You are stressed, like in exam. I finish with this. Now, the last area that we are very interested in, that we published, that we like very much. You see the red area, the rostral red area, which is pregenual anterior cingulate. So we stimulate this area, and I will show the experiment, what happens with a girl. Remember, this girl is in the hospital, it should be operated in a few days, and they are searching for their focus, epileptic focus. So the experiment is done in this way. She has to read letters, and she has to read words, and at a certain point, she is stimulated. Here is the girl.
Sella, muro, coltello, maestra, ferro, gatto, arancio, pulsante, auto, porchino, no, è un attimo di...
Da ridere?
Sì.
So she starts laughing. She doesn't know why. We have now many patients of this type. Some of them start to rationalize, say, well, it came to my mind a funny story. Why? The other are more honest, say, I don't know, I start laughing because I have to laugh. This is an area in which stimulation have a center for laughing. So we have a center for laughing, and we did something more. We show it to this patient a film in which was somebody crying or laughing or neutral. And every time they saw somebody laughing, the same leads, so the same electrode whose stimulation determines laughing was active. This red light was an enormous activity of gamma. So when you see somebody laughing, it's your laughing center. You laugh with the other people. It's something common. You know, some comedians know that. They start laughing, so the people also laugh. But that's for us, it's very important because it indicates how the mirror mechanism, it's a general mechanism. It's not only for understanding simple action like grasping, but for understanding emotion. I gave you an example about disgust. And this one is, we've never been able up to now to record from the lowest region, which apparently is related to depression and to negative things. That will be very nice if stimulating this one, you start crying. I don't know. Thank you.
Congratulations and my thanks in the name of my university, Universidad de Madrid, for your excellent talk and for sharing with us your experience, your knowledge in this especially relevant field that is neuroscience. It is the knowledge of how functions the human brain. That I think is nowadays perhaps the challenge most important in life science, perhaps. It is very, very particular that the neuron perhaps was the first cell individually to be understood very, very well with the development of electrophysiology and to know the basis of the action potential, membrane potential, and so on. And however, the extreme complexity of our brain is still a mystery, but a big and extremely interesting challenge. So for us has been and for me particularly, not as a rector, but as a scientist, has been a completely pleasure to be here in this session. But also at the level of institutional level, it's also for me an honor to be here because I think the neuroscience activity in our Faculty of Medicine and in our university has been very strong since his birthday. We are now in the 50-year celebration, and since the 60s, end of the 60s, the Department of Neuroscience, Morphology, Neuroscience and Histology has been developing a very extremely interesting work in this area. So for me, only to be very grateful with you. I think that the most important, in my opinion, value of this session is not only the knowledge, not only to share your vision of this very interesting mechanism, but also, or the most important is the transmission of your passion for this field. I think that only the great scientist has a passion when they are talking about the research they are carrying out, and it's also the most important for the students. I remember when I was young that I attended also some specific lecture for great scientists, and this was extremely important for the development of my career. So today I think that many of the students that have followed your presentation will be probably impacted for the rest of the life on this session. So thank you very much, Giacomo.